Joseph, have you heard a timetable for an official announcement of the new AD?
I haven't, Chris. These things, I mean, we saw how the Willie stuff went down. I mean, these things can take off. I don't think they're going in blind. I think they have a list that they're going to work off of. And, I wouldn't be surprised if maybe right after the 4th of July holiday, maybe that time span, maybe before Media Day in Vegas, we have a hire. But no, I have not been given an exact timetable. I will bring up one thing, and I think you mentioned, or somebody brought it up, the interim that they named. I thought that was very interesting that they went outside the athletic department and
Yes.
Renee Couture assigned somebody from her inner circle on the other side of campus, because that tells me, one, he's got a finance and money background, so he covers that. But I think this is a message that she's sending, that there's a short leash right now, and she wants to keep the athletic department very close in terms of how things are going to operate. And I don't think this is for the long term, but I think it's just a message that, hey, I'm going to be more hands-on than many people think she already is. So that appointment right there to me was real interesting. And, we'll have to see what happens. Probably not going to be a lot of action for that person. And, we're talking the end of the year with stuff, but I thought that was a huge takeaway from today and how they made the announcement.
Andy, Dayon, you got any questions for JD?
No, Joseph went right into it. I was going to ask him about the interim athletic director, and I think in particular, Joseph, to add on to your point, how that individual comes from that finance background. I think that's a key point, just in terms of what you mentioned, was ultimately the deciding factor to move on from Chris Pezman, where when it comes to that revenue aspect, he just wasn't cutting it under Pezman.
I don't know the maybe the pecking order of those around her in terms of like the lieutenants and all the other vice president stuff. But I mean, she could have gone probably in a different set of ways, and maybe this just worked out best. I mean, it's a short-term fix. This person, unless they choose that they're going to stay in-house, which I can't see that happening. This is a very short-term fix. So, that was one thing. But, I mean, clearly this is an athletic department. I'm not going to say you need to bring in somebody that just goes over the books and you have to find ways. I mean, does that mean, they're not going to cut sports. They're not going to just start slashing positions and stuff and do all that stuff. Do they have a money problem? Yeah. Does it need to be addressed? Absolutely, especially with the things that are on the horizon. But I just think that there's eventually going to need to be some type of, go each line by line, each sport, and sort of take a wholesale inventory of the athletic department to see where they can make the most gains and make the most progress and the quickest progress.
I got a question. How much influence do maybe coaches like Sampson would have on I don't want to say a move like this, but in regards to having strategies or being able to give advice on, like he mentioned recently, about marketing plans and different things maybe that he wasn't hearing, but he always talks about being proactive and looking forward and looking to other things. Influence like him may have on not being stagnant and realizing what's coming in the NIL and the different ways to market and reach this new generation to be able to keep Houston at a high level to really be a powerhouse.
I guarantee you Kelvin Sampson is going to be a part of this in some capacity. He may not go to the in-person meetings, but he will have some input. I think Willie Fritz will be a guy that they look at. And I think and you see that happen with the football hires. I mean, you see other coaches, that get involved and they weigh in because, one, they may know the person. They may have been in the conference that the person was in, may have had some type of direct affiliation with them. So I think you're absolutely right that you need to lean on people like that, because Kelvin Sampson has been around some pretty good ADs, one in particular at Oklahoma, Joe Castiglione, that he talks really high of. So I think there's something to learn by including these coaches, and who knows, I remember a few years ago, Zach Selman, who's at Mississippi State. He was a guy that some here at the University of Houston thought would be a really good fit for the job. And, obviously he took Mississippi State's job, but that just shows you that if you have these coaches that have some type of expertise and knowledge, you might as well lean on them, because you don't want to miss out and maybe hire the wrong person. Because we see the state of a lot of athletic programs right now across the country. You see what's going on at Arizona. You've seen some of the problems that have gone on at either USC and UCLA and Northwestern. So you gotta really hit this one out of the park. And I think Houston will go down the list. And I think Tillman and Renew have an idea. It's just a matter of who they're going to be able to lure to Cullen Boulevard.
And Connor Diaz is correct in that Zach and Kellen are best friends.
Absolutely, yes.
And Zach was the name I heard this afternoon. Right? Yeah, I thought he's coming here. Oh, let me toss this out. And I know, JD, you probably short on time.
I'm good, guys.
All three of y'all, do y'all believe that the next hire will come from a Power 4 program? I'd be kind of surprised.
If it's not Jeremiah Dickey, I think it will come from a Power 5. I think there's only probably a few that they'll look at Power 5, and he makes sense just because of the ties there. I'm not sure if he's a top of the, if he's the favorite right now in the club. I don't think it's there yet. I think he has interest, but I would think if you're Houston, you got to go for somebody at a Power 5. And is that a sitting AD or is that a deputy? That's where you run into, how do you address that? But I mean, there are people that will want to come and live in Houston now that it's in the Big 12.
Yeah, I think I pretty much would echo the same thing that JD said. I think it's best, and you should look from a Power 5, because it's particularly as someone who's being able to see what a Power 5 not only is where it's going, but understand what it takes to succeed. I think someone having to see and being an experience, whatever position that they have, have that experience and knowledge to be able to see how where it is, understand it, and have a vision and a plan for different marketing strategies, because Houston is a big city. I mean, like you said, just 3 sponsors where you mentioned, when people think about it, that's way more than that. I think Houston in a lot of different ways are comfortable with just kind of being stagnant in many different areas. Status quo. And I think in the potential that they have to really reach that next level, they got to hit out the park with this AD, and they really have to kind of think out of the box in regards to what Houston would normally do and how they would normally operate.
Yeah, I agree 100%, especially considering Pezman, the UH background that he had, alumni moving on from him. It's going to have to be someone from a Power 5 to really sell on the alumni. And if it's not from a Power 5, then it has to be someone, in my opinion, that's completely outside the box, maybe from another industry. But if it's from an athletic background, I agree with both of you. It has to be from Power 5.
Chris, a key thing I think for those who are listening, that to know about whoever takes this job, they're coming into a situation where, we talk about the money and the budget and where it's at, but facility wise, they're in a really good position. They've got some things that they need to do, maybe baseball, some softball stuff, the track, but major infrastructure, TDCU, the football ops, Guy Fertitta, that's all set. And then you look at the contracts. I don't have every head coach, but of the major ones, Willie's signed through 2028, Kelvin's through 2027, Todd Whitting's through 2026, Ron Huey's got 1 season left. Softball coach is expiring in July, so that will be at the top of the order. They just hired a tennis coach, and then the volleyball coach who's done a great job, David Rare. He's got about, I believe, 4 more years left. So from that standpoint, there isn't a lot that needs to change, but it certainly puts on notice those underperforming sports that, hey, if someone comes in, this may be it for you, and you need to turn it around now, because that's typically what happens when a new AD comes in. They want to put their stamp on things, and since the 2 major revenue sports are sealed, that's where the changes are likely to come.
Andy, do you want to bring in our other guest to fill up the screen?
We're about to have a loaded screen, but before I bring in Ryan, who has an intro that I have to read from, I want to ask this question to you, Joseph, that was asked by Jeb on YouTube, he said, were the I guess just the outcomes with softball, baseball, and women's basketball, and quite frankly, how they've underperformed the last few seasons. Did that play any part in the decision to move on from Chris Pezman?
I mean, I don't see how it couldn't. It's part of. All of us have jobs where we have bosses that maybe at the end of the year you sit in there and they tell you what you did good, what you maybe need to improve on, and I think those are the ones that fall under that category of need improvement. And I think when it comes to some of the Olympic sports and some of the non, the big three, so to speak, I think there's been some neglect. You look at what Carl Lewis and Leroy and Will Blackburn have done with track. Maybe they're the exception. David Rare is the exception with volleyball, but some of the other sports have really fallen through the cracks. And I think that becomes part of your evaluation at the end of the year that, hey, what's going on with this? We want a competitively well-rounded athletic program, and that's not competitively well-rounded when you have these struggling programs. And then on top of that, when you give extensions that add money, I think us four are the only ones who haven't got paid in the last few years, got the extra deals. But in all seriousness, I think that all you just throw it in a bowl, and it just shows some. If you're going to highlight the misses, those are the misses that were part of Chris Pezman's tenure.